Good morning and welcome to the Space Race. Before I get started, I want to let you know that this presentation will be brought to you by V8, which promotes good health and for you to be original. So this presentation is brought to you by them. That's how big of a deal I am right now. Okay, now, Space Race. We need to make sure we're conscious of the fact that human beings, since the beginning of time, I can only imagine, have been very curious about what lurks up there in the sky. And thanks to Galileo, we will find out, we'll have a little closer proximity to what's going on up there. And then we see the 20th century, 1900s, we see technology take a turn for the better of not only being able to see from Earth, have a better vantage view of what's going on up there, but actually go up there. And we can thank the Germans. We can thank the Germans for investing in rocket technology, especially in World War II. And that will be the rockets that we use eventually, about a decade after their fall from power of the Nazis. But we will see the use of these rockets to get up into space.
Please excuse the interruption.
Looking at, lost train of thought there. We're looking at skip ahead in the 1950s. If you're sitting in America in the 1950s, you're told that the Russians, they can't do anything right. They're backwards, and that's kind of a label that stuck with them throughout the 1800s and into the 1900s. And they couldn't make automobiles very effectively or efficiently, and they couldn't make refrigerators. And I told you guys a joke of automobiles was a waiting list, so they're not an overabundance in the Soviet Union. So as Americans are told that the Russians have things backwards, they're going to surprise us on October 4th, 1957, kind of in the same month of the Bolshevik Revolution, 1917, which brought communism into Russia. And again, we have this competition trying to sell your product. What better sales pitch for communism to say? Remember all the thousands upon thousands of years we've been stargazing? Come to communism, and we can take you to space without a V8. Now, we look at October 4th. We see this launching up of Sputnik. It's about the size of a basketball, beach ball probably, more likely the size. And they're going to launch this up there using the rocket technology of the day. And it's going to travel up there about 18,000 miles per hour. So it'll be cruising around Earth up there, and this is going to terrify Americans. They view this fear that if the Soviets can launch a satellite to space, they can not only spy on us from space, but now they could use a nuclear attack to carry a nuclear attack on the United States from a greater distance. So this is, again, going to terrify the Americans. This is going to be an impetus for kind of change. I posted an article on Google Classroom from NPR. I've listened to this years ago. I thought this was fascinating, looking at how GPS can be traced back to October 4th, 1957, with the launching of Sputnik. And you will see that in that NPR article. A month later, after Sputnik, they're going to launch another satellite up into space, and they're going to put a dog in it, this one. So this is the first animal launched into space, and her name was Laika, which is Russian for Barker. So she must have been a little loud. But we're looking at, she'll be launched up there, and she will orbit in the space shuttle until her unfortunate death. A month after Sputnik 2, Laika, America is going to try to catch up, and they're going to try to launch their own rocket into space. And unfortunately, as you can see on the left there, there's going to be a massive explosion. That's not normal for rockets right there, that explosion. And it's going to crash to the Earth. And it'll be, the newspapers of the day will call it Flopnik, kind of a play off of Sputnik. But we see the education system. I have a little picture of old Kansas out there. We have the education system under fire. And I have the old building because that building was still standing in 1957, and it was up in 1957. So we look at education, especially math and science departments. will take a big hit in looking at how do we revamp these to make sure we catch up the Soviets? Because again, this is a competition. In 1961, 4 years after Sputnik, you will see the Russians. Again, this is a space race. They are winning the space race. They put the first man in the space. A guy by the name of Yuri Gagarin. He would be a Soviet hero for quite some time in the 1960s until his untimely death in a jet fighter accident, I think in the mid-60s, I believe. We're looking at Yuri Gagarin, and I'll put on there I'll make sure I type in how to spell his name. We will follow up by sending our first man up into space, Alan Shepard, and then we'll follow that with John Glenn. On the right, he'll be the first American to orbit Earth. So you see that we are on the heels of the Soviets, but we're still not there yet. Now, with technology still not able to get to the moon, but JFK is going to give a speech here at Rice University down in Texas. He's going to give a speech that is can be summed up as with this quote: "We choose to go to the moon." And I'm going to put the video on. We're going to watch that in class as well. It's an inspiring speech. We'll just watch a snippet of it because it's a little bit longer, but we'll watch about 5 minutes of it. Very inspirational. Again, you can draw a lot of life lessons from this speech. You can pull into your life to enhance what you do. Now, as a result of that JFK speech, we see we have a race to the moon. It's more of a challenge, a speech. We choose to go to the moon. And we could add on to that, we choose to go to the moon before the Soviet Union chooses to go to the moon. We will get to the moon before the Soviet Union gets to the moon. So we see a race to get to the moon by the end of the decade, he says, which he gives a speech in the early 1960s. So he's hoping to reach the moon by the end of the decade, which would be the end of the 60s. It's too bad he would not be around to see it, unfortunately for him and for many Americans. Now, we look at this race to the moon. We see it's going to be a competition between the two, trying to get there. And I went with this quote from Talladega Nights: "If you ain't first, you are last." And it's a race to the finish. And we'll see America with the launching of Apollo 11 will be the first space shuttle to reach the moon. And you can see these three gentlemen on the left here. And you have you have Neil Armstrong, you have Buzz Aldrin, and you have Michael Collins. And these three are the guys who will be the ones who first reach the moon and return back to Earth. So that really concludes. If I was to look over my notes real quick, see if anything I missed, some dates. After Yuri Gagarin, he launched April 12th, 1961. 3 weeks later will be Alan Shepard in 1961. John Glenn will be the first to orbit Earth, February of 1962, first American, not the first person. Russians beat us there as well. Anything else here? What did I see? One thing that I thought was fascinating when I read up on this stuff, just how, we got to the moon, we got to space, and it's become a little less, the novelty of space has worn off. You do see the funding of the NASA program start to dive. The interest from Americans in NASA starts to dive, starts to go down. So, but this is, I thought, short and sweet. And that is all. Thank you for listening.